Next question, Tavara. Tavara School uses both the internet and an intranet. Careful, these two words mean different things, internet and intranet. Describe 4 disadvantages to students of using the internet compared with the intranet. So some of the disadvantages is that the internet is not policed. That's one of the disadvantages. So there's no content filter. Content filter. Sorry. Then the next part is that the material on the internet can be biased. So the material on the internet can be biased. Okay. The third point is that the material on the internet may not be reliable. Okay, it might not suit some people's needs, may not be reliable. And the third one, there are more security issues. When using the internet. Okay. You can also mention that anyone can create a website on the internet, so inaccurate information can be posted. You can also mention that there are more distractions when using the internet. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Next question, email is a service provided by the internet. For each of the following problems associated with email, describe methods of protecting your data. So the first one is spam. So it's a 4 marker. So with spam, what do you do is the first thing, you don't reply. Do not reply to spam mails. To spam emails, okay? Then what are you going to do? The second point is that you're going to use a spam email filter. Then the third thing that you're going to do is you're going to block images. You're going to block images in HTML. Messages, right? As these are used as web beacons. Then the last point is that you do not sign up to commercial any scam mailing lists. Okay, these are some 4 protection methods that you can write for 4 marks. The other point is, like, you can just unclick check boxes when buying items online. Okay. Next part is protection against viruses on computer. What you can do is you can scan emails or attachments before opening. Then what you can do is use up-to-date antivirus software. Third point is you can write is that you do not download attachments from unknown sources. And then avoid opening spam mails, because that has related to viruses. Avoid opening spam emails. These are some of the answers for 4 marks. All right, let's move on. Next question, 7. The introduction of computers in an organization's payroll department has affected employees' working patterns. 2 examples of this are part-time working and job sharing. Describe what is meant by part-time working. Part-time working just refers to workers. This is 2 marks, so you have to write 2 points. Workers that work less than full-time, or that work less than limited number of hours. Okay, you can mention that as well. Then you can mention that this could be for fewer hours. The keyword here is fewer. For fewer hours than a full working day or working week. You can also mention that, this could be fewer days than a full working week. Then what is the next part? Describe what is meant by job sharing. Job sharing, 2 marks, is a full-time job which is shared between part-time, between 2 or more workers. You can mention that 2 or more workers, or between part-time workers. You can say that the one continues to work. Continues. You can mention that one continues to work. One continues to work when the other has left. When the other has left. You can also mention that, one could work in the morning, the other one could work in the afternoon, or one could work for 3 days and the other 2 days. These are some of the factors some of the answers that you can write when describing what is meant by job sharing. Next question. The introduction of these computers has had positive and negative effects on payroll department workers. Describe the benefits to workers of introducing computers into their department. So, this is for 4 marks, so you can write 4 points. You can say that the staff are kept more up to date, with their work, You can also mention that there's an increase in job opportunities, You can mention that there's more accurate calculation of wages, or meaning that there are less errors made in the calculations. And you can also mention that the manual tasks, let me just write that properly, the manual tasks are reduced. Okay, these are some of the 4 points that you can write for 4 marks. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, the next question is, internet banking is changing how we carry out banking transactions. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages to the customers of the introduction of internet banking. 6 marks. They're asking you to discuss the advantages and disadvantages. So you're going to write 3 points for advantages and 3 points for disadvantages. Combined total, that should give you 6 marks. Okay, so I'm just going to write here advantages just to show you the difference. Advantages, you can mention that it reduces internet banking. It reduces the cost of traveling to the bank. You don't need to drive all the way to the bank. You can do internet banking. Then it's 24/7 banking, fully operational. And it reduces the time wasted waiting in queues. Waiting in queues. Okay, because it's internet banking, it's fast. And yeah. You can also mention that the interest rates are usually better when using internet banking, or it's easier to shop around for better bank accounts. You can also mention that disabled people do not have to travel to the bank in order to carry out transaction. People can spend more time doing other activities rather than traveling to the bank. These are some of the advantages they can mention. Other part is disadvantages to internet banking. Less physical banks means that people have to travel further to go to the bank. So if there's not so many bank locations, you can mention that there's a security. Security is an issue as transactions are carried out over the internet. Okay. More risk of farming. Okay. Hopefully you guys know more risk of farming, or let's say fraud. Okay, phishing. Other one is that it's easier to make errors while using internet banking. For example, we can mention that it's easier to make errors when using internet banking. For example, For example, incorrect input data. Incorrect input data. These are some of the 3 points for writing for disadvantages. You can also mention the most important one is that the user needs a reliable internet connection, and if the internet connection drops during a transaction, there might be issues. So that's some of the disadvantages you can mention for 6 marks. All right, let's move on to the next question. Next question. Expert systems. It's pretty fun, actually. Expert systems have many applications. Name 2 applications that use expert systems. That would be diagnostic systems, and hopefully you guys know this one, chess games. They use expert systems. Careers, tax, all that stuff use expert systems. Next question, take 3 components of an expert system. That would be an interactive user interface. We're not using a spreadsheet. We're not using a monitor. We're not using a printer for this one. We're using a knowledge base. Yes, we're using a knowledge base for an expert system. Search engine, nope. Actuator, that's something physical. Rules base, parameters, for sure. Okay, we're using an interactive user interface, knowledge base, and rules base, which are the 3 components of an expert system. All right, let's move on to the next question. Next question is that a system's life cycle is followed when a new computer system is being created. Check whether the following statements are examples of the analysis stage, the design stage, or the evaluation stage of the system's life cycle. Identifying the problems with the current system. That would be part of the analysis stage. Deciding on testing strategies. That would be on the design stage. Observation of workers using the current system. That would be part of the analysis stage. Comparing the solution, the original task requirements. That would be the evaluation stage. So that's answers for 4 marks. Let's move on to the next question. Now the next question is a 6 marker. A teacher is planning to develop a presentation to show his younger students aged 5 to 6. Describe the factors which would need to be considered when designing the presentation for these students. 6 marks, 6 points, okay? So when using the presentation, he should use animation because their age is 5 to 6, right? To keep their attention. Use animations to keep their attentions. They technically it's just to increase their attention span. Then use sound. Use sound to keep them interested because you're trying to get their attention, to keep them interested. Then use larger font. The third point is use larger font size so the text is easier to read. So the text is easier to read. Okay? Then use a font. Use a font that is suitable to the age group, okay? That is suitable to the age group. You can use Calibri instead of text. Instead of Times New Roman. Times New Roman is used in formal writing and all that stuff. Then you can say use more vibrant colors. More vibrant colors should be used. And how many points is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the last point would be short sentences. Nobody wants to read huge paragraphs. Short sentences should be used. This is your answer for 6 marks. You can also mention that, use a font that is easier to read. Make the presentation colorful to keep their attention. You can mention that the language used needs to be simple because they're aged from 5 to 6. You can also mention that the words need to be short and simple. You can also mention that more images than text is needed, and use slide transitions to make it more exciting for these age group. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Next question is a tick box type question. Generic file formats can be used when saving files. Tick 3, generic file formats. That's not going to be .xls. It's going to be .pdf, .rtf, and .csv. Everything that you guys have encountered in the course. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Explain why generic file formats are needed. Okay, part 2 marks. So generic, I'm going to explain that why. Generic file formats, they allow the user to save files, so they can be opened in other software. You can also mention that to create a standard so that other software can understand the contents. You can also mention that, example of a file just saved on one type of the device, software being used on another type, for example, a mobile phone to a PC. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Next question, describe the following terms with reference to navigation from a web page. Okay, hyperlink. Hyperlink is a method of accessing other resources, such as web pages, from, or let's say other web pages from current web pages. Accessing other web pages from current web page. The navigation is done by hovering or clicking on the link. You can also mention that clicking on the word, phrase, image, or area of page links one web page to another part of the same web page. Next part, href, is an attribute. It's an attribute within a hyperlink or an anchor. Okay, can be used. You can mention that it can be used to specify the URL of the web page or resource to be used. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Explain the difference between the use of relative file paths and absolute file paths in navigation from a web page. So, relative, we're going to describe this, is that relative file paths, they only show the name or file path destination of the file, path destination of the file. Meaning, whereas absolute file paths, it gives the full web address, or the full path. And absolute, you can mention that absolute always has the domain name, whereas relative, you can mention that relative does not need the domain name. You can also mention that relative finds files in the current site. If you need to find files on a different website, then absolute needs to be used. Absolute starts from the root, and that relative does not require a path, only subfolders. These are some of the points that you can write for 4 marks. Let's move on to the next question. Explain the difference between analog data and digital data. 2 marks, 1 point for each. You can say that analog data is continuous, very important, and digital data is discrete. Okay, digital data is discrete. The other point is that you can mention is that the analog data can only be read. Analog data can only be read by a sensor. And and analog data needs to be converted before it is read by the computer. I'm going to give you an example of what this means. Analog data is like right now, like how I'm talking to the microphone. It's human speech. Human speech is being converted into digital data, as which you guys are hearing on the other side. Wherever you guys are listening, the data which I'm saying right now, like the human speech voice of talking into this microphone, is being converted. So what I'm speaking is of some form of an analog data, and when it's converted into what you guys are hearing, it's done through the conversion of analog data to digital data, because computers can only read zeros and ones only. Okay. You can also mention that analog data is the output from a sensor, and analog data cannot be understood by a computer, and it needs to be converted before it's read by a computer. These are some of the points you can write for 2 marks. Okay, so now the final question is, as our use of the internet increases, e-safety becomes essential. Discuss why e-safety is needed. So the first point that you're going to be writing, this question is for 8 marks, so you're going to be writing 8 points in total. So the first point, actually, we're not going to be numbering this, because in the exam you don't want to number these things. You have to write it as a paragraph. So e-safety protects personal data from people who should not have access to it. That's going to be your first point. The second point is going to be that personal data needs to be kept safe so that others cannot use it against people. Your third point is that it protects sensitive data. The fourth point is going to be use of it is because e-safety protects vulnerable people. Fifth point is going to be that it protects other people's views, and e-safety trains users to be responsible on the internet, as well as we can mention that it covers a number of electronic devices like computers, tablets, mobile phones, and gaming consoles. The final point that you're going to mention is that you need to know how to report problems on the internet. Some other stuff that you can mention is that e-safety, it reduces the risks when information communication technology is being used on social media sites, online gaming platforms, where people assume that these platforms are safe. You can also mention that issues, example, access of personal data, spreading rumors, or that form. These are some of the points that you can mention to discuss why the use of e-safety is needed. This seems to be the final part of the paper. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. And do comment below on what your thoughts are about the video. And I think that's it. Alright. Bye, guys.